feeling. I mean, I'm going to reference that because it's poetic and what makes sense to me. But that feeling that I had leaving Jurassic Park, I wanted to emulate that. I wanted to tell stories. I've always been fascinated by imagination and ingenuity and just kind of creativity. And filmmaking was, I felt, one of the easiest conduits to release that. Right, you get to collaborate with people, but also you spend a lot of time in your head conjuring up stories and characters, and the more I learned about the craft, and it's more technical the more you learn about it, but like at that baseline, it was just about creating that sensation and giving people the opportunity to experience, hopefully, if we do our jobs right, that same feeling.
So, are you a gamer?
Uh, like loosely, like I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm a big gamer, but I dabble.
Okay. Um, so teen years, what were the big movies?
Mm, teen years. Well, like you said, the best thing about working at a movie theater, and that's like I feel like because movies, even though they weren't super expensive, when I was younger, it was all about. Uh, I remember distinctly Batman and Robin, loving that. um,
Wow.
Casper. Uh,
Casper.
Casper, to this day, is one of those movies I can watch whenever. It's like Beetlejuice. I can just put it on and enjoy it, and I want to share it with people who've never seen it.
Doesn't that have
Um,
like a James Horner score to it?
Casper,
I
I
remember
think
it has a good score.
it's a great. I think it's James Newton Howard.
Oh, okay.
I think, but there were these puppets that Pizza Hut had of the four main ghosts, and I only got like three of them. I don't think I even got Casper, but I would do these horrible puppet shows from behind the couch of because I love that movie so much. But Batman and Robin, Casper, Mortal Kombat,
Oh, wow.
the first one, and I remember the in '97 when the second one came out. Uh, I was going to go to the midnight show, and I was, I don't know, I was like 11 or 12 or something, and my dad was like, "Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to go to the midnight show," and my brother and I were all excited, and they were sold out, and we didn't get to see it until like Sunday, and I was devastated. But I remember seeing it, and I was like, "This is the best experience ever! Look at all these characters that I love," and like you watch it now, and you're like, "Good God."
Were you big, I remember around when those movies were coming out, I was reading a ton about VFX. Were you a VFX kid? Did you pay attention to that stuff?
I not honestly, not really. I was always just kind of. It was so experiential, and I didn't really think about it honestly until college when I started to learn more about like that side of it. I feel like as movies progressed, you became more cognizant of
Sure.
CGI. Uh, but I was always just more like, wow, look how much it's evolved.
Hmm.
Like look what they can do in movies now that they couldn't do back then. And nowadays it feels like it's a competition of like what's practical versus what's digital, and it's like, well, film's digital now, so deal with it. But yeah,
Well,
and then
is it really competition? Because it seems like digital's been significantly winning.
I just meant like practical versus CG. Like there's the ongoing discussion of people being like, well, practical puppets and all that stuff is a better outlet than CGI, and CGI's people rely on fixing it in post, and like I'm sure as an editor you have to see
Yeah.
that too because you're seeing how movies are coming together, and in post a lot of times the movie changes considerably. Um, but I think this reliance that people have, this self righteous being like, well, if it's not real, then it's not as good. And it's like, guys, the best VFX are the ones that you don't even see.
Right, and
Like,
the
and
proof's always in the pudding too. Just it's more like because these like the hybrids, like the practical then the digital hybrids are tend to be some of the better ones. But like
yeah,
my element is always that it feels like people do more the fix it in post, do more digital effects just because the producers or a studio wants more control to change their mind later. Which I don't know if that's been your experience.
uh, I, sure, that is a reason for things to happen. But more often than not, it's you know in a well-made studio movie, you don't have that issue, hopefully. But there's always going to be things that, if you can fix it, you might as well. You
Right.
know, but as much money goes into fixing someone's makeup smears or enhancing their triceps than it is to create an alien army. Like the vanity fixes on CG now is insane.
I remember
Um,
I was working with this one editor, and he was in Avid moving a pimple from some actress's forehead, and I was just like, "That's our job. We're supposed to do that." But we're
it can get expensive, and a good like some editors will just paint stuff out that's super simple like that. But I remember on Avengers, the first one, there was a moment when it's like this really emotional moment where they're all gathered around the table after Coulson has died. Spoilers. And Chris Evans like puts his hand on his head, and the makeup was so heavy that when he did it, he like smeared the entire like foundation on his head, and it was the best take. And so they had to track this entire shot where his hand was moving, and the mate like it became a very expensive moment, but like that kind of stuff is doable, and you don't have to reshoot it, which can oftentimes cost a lot more. And you may not even capture the same emotion. It's kind of like coming in and doing it and hoping that you hit that same sweet spot.
So rewinding back, you got out to LA for college? Is where you at? Murray
I
State?
did. I did. So I went to Murray. The only school I applied for was USC, because again, it was my blind stubbornness or headstrong will. Like I knew that's where I was going.
Was this for directing?
Huh?
Was this for directing?
Yeah, I wanted to go to film school, and I mean, like you always hear like, well, that school's hard to get into, and like no, I'm got an iron will, and I'm gonna go. And I flew out. My dad flew me out to LA for the first time when I was a junior, and I was enamored partially because like I had built it up to such a thing. Like I needed to love it. Like I had to like it, because if I didn't, then like my entire life had been a ruse. And so I came out and I'm like, yeah, homeless people and traffic and like it's horrible air quality. Man, this is the best experience ever.
I'm guessing you stayed
and
near USC.
we were staying like right near downtown. And again, I had no concept of like how it's basically a gang zone where USC is at.
Yeah.
But it was things like that. I didn't care, right? There could have been a gang war at the time I was visiting the college. I would have been like, yeah, I can't wait to come here. And I didn't get in, and I was like devastated because it was again the only college I applied for, and I found out maybe like 3 weeks before graduation, and I was like, shit, I've got to go somewhere. Like that was the other thing. Like college was never a question of like, am I going to go? It was like, I'm going to go.
And you always knew film school, obviously.
And I yeah, it was going to be. I didn't, and it wasn't really until high school that I knew that there was such things as film schools. But I didn't want to go to like a trade school, like the New York Film Academy, or like these 2-year, like getting your welding license.
It was weird for me when I was getting out because, like, I don't know if I decided as early as you, but I think it was like 13 when I decided, and I kept trying to convince my parents, and my dad in particular was fixated on in-state, and IU has like a good film library, but there's not really film school around here. Like the closest was going to be like Southern Illinois, which I always kind of in my head wonder what could have happened if I'd gone there because it would have been at the same time Joe Swanberg was there.
Okay.
I think Western Kentucky, it's either Murray State or Western Kentucky has a good film, or it has some program there.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
I was a theater journalism major there. It was a double major because I didn't. To me, that they may have added it, but to me, that was like the closest thing to film was like theater and journalism.
I did journalism too. Yeah, in high school and a little in college.
It's good though because it teaches you to do stuff like this, talk to people, which is 3/4 of everything in LA or Hollywood in general. But yeah, so I didn't get in. Went to I went to Murray. They let me in. I like applied, and like the next day they were like, "You want to come?" I got a really great scholarship, and like it's a great campus. And I'm sure if I had not convinced myself that I needed to hate it, then I probably would have just stuck it out because it was nice. A lot of my friends from high school were there. super affordable, and it's a great school. For all intents, the people that I know that stayed there were really happy, but I was not, because I was making myself so unhappy, because I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like, this isn't my dream. And so I started looking for schools that would allow a spring transfer, which is actually really uncommon, because a lot of places don't want you to transfer until you're a junior. Okay. You know, they want you to get your ninth. And the good thing was, because I had taken so many AP classes and stuff, I was almost a sophomore as is. So after my semester at Murray, I had enough credits to be like a second semester sophomore.
Where did you go in LA?
It was a school called Chapman. It was in Orange County. I had never been to Orange County. I'd never visited the campus. But I read a book on the top 10 film schools in the United States, and like, you know, USC and NYU and Emerson. And but to me, like, I needed to be in LA. Like, there were other great, American University. Like, there was some other cool ones that were really great, but a lot of them also, you had to be a junior to transfer.
Okay.
And Chapman was still up and coming. They had just gotten, in 2007 when I applied, they had just gotten this big endowment from Marion Knott, who owned a Knott's Berry Farm. Her family owned the theme park.
Okay.
And it was like an $8 or $9 million thing, and they had built 2 sound stages, and it was, you know, apparently this really great, grandiose thing. And they had a 35 millimeter camera. They had they had all the equipment that students were allowed to rent for free.
Would 2007, 2008, when would this have been?
This was 2007. I started in January of 2008, but I applied in like November of 2007.
Okay. What was Chapman like when you actually got to sit down and got there?
I loved it, because I was like, I have to love it. It was like, and the experience itself was great. And I kind of sped once I got there. Again, my brain was like, okay, well, now you got to graduate. Like, you're close to it, but it felt like college to me was being in the dugout of a baseball game. And I was so close to like getting to go outside and bat, but like, you still got to watch everybody else to do what you want to do.
What were the movies you were watching in college?
That's one of the best things I think about film school is I got to experience movies like Night of the Hunter, this Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters movie that is to this day one of my favorite movies, that informed a lot for me in terms of storytelling, visually, like cinematography. We also watched like the Great Train Robbery, and we watched Battleship Potemkin, and we watched Citizen Kane, and we watched all the like filmic, I felt, the textbook movies that, but we also watched things like In the Mood for Love, which, when we were talking about production design, which was beautiful. And my production design professor, who just passed away recently, but he did Blade Runner and Back to the Future. And, I learned so much from him, and in my emphasis, I actually changed it to production design, because there were 65 directing, and when you got to like your last 4 semesters, you had to pick an emphasis. So you could either pick editing, directing, sound design, production design, or cinematography. And I honestly didn't ever really care about cinematography. Like, I hated learning about f-stops and lighting and app. Like, it just was something that was not super interesting to me. And I didn't want to do sound. Editing was fine. I just didn't like being in front of a computer that much.
It's incredibly boring.
But it's also it's a skill set that I don't really have. Like, I don't see. I guess I see the story in a different way, and then once the editor kind of does the assembly, like it allows, and my experience as I've done more has allowed me to be better at that. But like when I was in college, the idea of being like, well, do I want to be an editor, was like, I wanted something that felt kind of active. Which, now in retrospect, editors make or break your movie. But so I chose production design, and there were 4 of us. And
was it just process of elimination, or was there something that stood out in particular?
I thought, because I loved visuals so much, and I thought, if I can tell a story with costumes and set design and these small details that tell who these people within a scene are, then I can tell a story off a script. Because to me, production design was just silent storytelling. It's if I put the camera in a room and panned around it, could I pick up who these people were? You know,
Okay.
and like to me, that was more impactful than create. Like everybody's world, I think in those department heads are so unique, and I think they're all equally important. But for me, it was something that I really identified with, and I understood. And again, working with Larry Paul, who's the production design mentor, and I also it was I didn't want to be grouped into the 65 directors who then went to make a thesis film that some of them spent $50,000-$60,000 on, and the school gave you 5,000, but you could also rent free equipment, and they had all the light, like they had a gold room that had like 10Ks and 5Ks and light boxes and sliders and dollies and track, and like you could rent a lot of the shit for free, but people always wanted to go big.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, another thing about film school in general, especially for screenwriting majors, is nobody was telling these kids don't write big movies because no one's going to buy them. So, you know, these screenwriting kids that had to write
Well,
you know, they're what?
are these shorts that they're the thesis
Well,
shorts?
well, for screenwriters, you have to leave with 2 features or a feature and a pilot. And they were just kind of like, write what you want. We wanted Chapman really liked the idea of like Hollywood movies,
Okay.
like big commercial, like, and you could even tell the people who made artsy. But you know, I went to college with the Duffer Brothers, and the Duffer Brothers thesis film was a movie called Eater, and it was about a shape-shifting cannibal in a police station. And I saw it, and I was like, "This is one of the coolest. Like, this is bold, you know." And it was weird, and it was kind of not really scary, but like it stuck out to me. They were a year ahead of me, but like that to me was one of the ones that I watched and was like, "This is the kind of like these are the kind of movies that I think people should be doing." Um,
Well,
but yeah,
it was like a lo-fi thing they were doing, or because I mean that's still pretty high
it
concept.
wasn't. It was way more commercial than what I like. Stranger Things feels so nostalgic, and Eater felt nothing. Eater felt like an '80s like Ridley Scott movie. It was very straightforward. It was like young guy has a new wife. It's his first night as a rookie cop, and they've got this guy in lockup, and then you know the big twist at the end was the guy gets eaten and then is going home to his wife as the shapeshifter, and they graduated with like a deal with Fox, and they made a movie called Shelter or something that I was like Alexander Skarsgård, and they had Colleen Atwood do the costumes. Like it was this whole big thing, and then it got like shelved. Like no one ever saw it.
I was gonna say I don't think I heard about this.
I don't even know if it came out. Maybe it did, but then they went and wrote on Twin Peaks and you know whatever. They went on and did their thing that they're doing now. But Chapman, and I think film school in general, maybe everybody is as good as and as necessary as you need it to be to learn the things that like shaping a script, sure, and learning you know how to, but like I believe that people are either born storytellers or they're not. And if you weren't born with the foresight to build these stories, you can't learn to tell a good story. No one can sit down and tell you like, so these are you know I can give you the tools of the things that make potentially a great story. I can show you a bunch of great stories. But if you can't translate those elements into something, it's like not being able to draw, or people who can't dance, or people who can't sing. Like it's to me, storytelling is a talent.
I guess I've read a lot lately that makes the point that we just all of our brains work with stories. We narrativize our lives, and so like even to a point where like you know one of the chief traits that when you're looking for a mate, they actually use say storytelling is ability on top of just like looking desirable, being able to gain money or looking attractive. Like storytelling was actually a factor that goes into
Huh.
this, and I mean, I definitely believe that obviously people are better at it fundamentally, but I
Sure.
don't know, it's just an interesting. When so we don't I guess we never our paths never crossed, but someone basically had posted about your feature Dreamcatcher. Was had a sales agent at Berlin, or sold some at some at Berlin, and so the reason I was in particularly interested in having you on is I have this ongoing thing about directors from Evansville, just because there aren't any. And I mean, I don't know if you know of any, but I mean, like all I've got are like Bud Bedecker was not from here, much like yourself, but he spent most of his childhood in Evansville. But beyond that, there's this guy named Russell Harbaugh that directed a movie. He's like a few years behind me. And technically, you want to count Michael Rosenbaum, but he's Newberg. But and even I
Yeah,
mean, and there's been this growth up recently of like a lot of people are locally making a lot of features around here. But people that have gone out and made bigger budget movies or stuff out of Hollywood. You're one of the only ones. I didn't know you were out there. I mean, I think I knew someone mentioned that someone that's at Marvel from that used to go to Showplace, but that was about it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well also James Gunn. James Gunn's from St. Louis, but he and Michael Rosenbaum were best friends, and James actually would come to Newburgh quite often and make projects with. They've been friends since like their high school years. But James identifies like he knows all the places. When we were doing Guardians, like I remember talking to him about Newburgh and Evansville, and yeah, but while he was from St. Louis, he had a friendship with Michael, and they did stuff in Evansville as well.
When was that period? Do you know?
Ooh, that would have been probably the '80s, maybe early '90s, but it was a while back because they both came out here. I think around the same time. Like James Gunn got more involved with like the Trauma movies and doing kind of like parody pulp stuff, and then obviously his stuff evolved into doing stuff like Slither, and Michael got Smallville. So, but that's why like if you ever like James, he puts these people. I love that like these people that have built relationships with people that they've come up with. Will always use them in projects like that. That level of loyalty, I think, is really cool and powerful.
What were your first jobs like when you got out of film school?
Well, I had a very fortunate experience that a lot of people do not have, and I have tried never to take that for granted. But my first job was at Marvel.
Your
I
first job.
like after film school, like the day after graduation, I started on the first Captain America movie, and I had been interning in animation. I wanted to be in research and development, but somehow my resume had landed on the head of animation's desk, and they called me in, and I wasn't super interested in animation, but I learned a whole bunch. But I also was there at the studio, and they were prepping to shoot Thor, and they were building Asgard and like the sound stages, and I had access. Like me as a 19-year-old, like how can I reach out to, like I'm so close, I can like feel it. How do I get there? And I found a crew list, and I just started emailing. Mistake, learn the hierarchy of departments way better. But like I started emailing people, and I ended up emailing one of the supervising art directors. And he put me in contact with this guy who was the art department coordinator, who really took me under his wing, brought me on set, introduced me to Bo Welch, who was one of the biggest production designers of like, and it was just all these moments that were just like, this is so crazy that I'm here. And then on Captain America, getting to work with Rick Heinrich, who again was a big production design idol of mine. But through the art department coordinator, I also became cognizant of some of the production staff. And there was one of the SVPs of development and production at Marvel was this guy, Jeremy, who was really good friends with my animation supervisor. And they had like come up together, and he had gone to Northwestern. So he knew about like the Midwest, and we sat down on my exit interview, me and Jeremy, and he was like, "You're really refreshing. Like, I love that you don't want to be a producer." He's like, so many, and he was like 28. He had been Kevin Feige's assistant. And then when Kevin got bumped to being the president of Marvel Studios when it was created, he brought Jeremy up and said, now, he was producing Iron Man 2 at 27, 28 years old.
Okay.
So he respected that drive, that kind of like, yeah, this is what you want to do. But at the time, I was like, yeah, I think I really want to be a production designer. And he was like, there is a clear path to that. Like, and I can help you get there. Uh, and like 2 days later, he called and he was like, I think we have a job for you. We're starting a new department that's going to be Marvel Studios specific. That's going to conceptualize and create these worlds and to basically be the glue of the shared universe that they were aiming to create.
Okay.
And it was 3 of us when I first started, and I was an assistant, but I was getting to work from development before there was a director, before there was a script, all the way through production, all the way into post on these films, and really seeing how they came together, which really showed me, no, you do need to focus on writing and directing. Like, that's where your passion is. But knowing that everything starts in art, like keyframes, character design, storyboards, like learning all of that and the importance of those elements was so relatable and translatable. But like I said, that was my first job, and I was there for almost 7 years, and I did 20 movies with them over the course of that time. And then I reached kind of a level where after Infinity War that it was like, it's also such a young company. I mean, Kevin's only in his 40s, right? And all of the SVPs are really young. I could be there for another 15, 20 years and may not get, and like my path there was to become an SVP of production. And I think by then everybody knew what I wanted to do. So It was also kind of like, you going to write and direct? You going to stay here and keep working on the production? So, at that point I had gotten a producer title, but I was not being as fulfilled, and I felt kind of trapped, but I also felt safe because that had been my entire 20s. And so I left, and I was focusing on short films and music videos for a while, like just build a reel of material. And then I ran development for a horror production company called Crypt for a while, for about 1.5 years. Okay. And they were a subsidiary, like Jason Blum and UCP, the Universal Production Company, like had financed, and their model was to basically find filmmakers and to create short form horror content that then could be developed into films and television shows that we could set up and sell to various platforms. But like, that was another thing. Like for 1.5 years, when I was running development there, it was like I'm helping all these other people tell their stories and like not really doing it myself.
That does seem like a commonality. My thing I remember my feeling in LA always was that it's a town of talented people, and probably if you ask them, every single person wants to direct, maybe write and direct, and like obviously not. That's not going to happen. But it still means the town was full of talented, passionate people that just didn't get their chance. And so a lot of times, like they're in your position where they're watching someone else do what you want to do, and that's
absolutely
it was crazy frustrating.
It's also, though, I think very important to just shut up and listen though sometimes. And I'm forever grateful. Like I am aware of where my ambition got the best of me, where I would get impatient or I would get frustrated, but looking back, I'm just very grateful, but I wish sometimes maybe there were moments where I could have not been so precocious.
Was this like the Marvel time or just in general? We skated over this Marvel stuff. The Marvel stuff is kind of amazing. Just like I'm a big fan of the movies. Like I find a lot of the critiques of Marvel's filmmaking to be really cheap. If you'll indulge me and want to go down this quicksand hole, when Scorsese made the comments about Marvel, like there were so many things that pissed me off about the comments, and in particular just because when he did the essay, he cited like Hitchcock and Sam Fuller and all these movies that got trashed, but his main argument seemed to be that there's no auteur behind it. And my counter argument, especially in the era of peak TV, is that these are producer field movies. They aren't. I mean, the directors do bring a lot of stuff to them, obviously, but like there's the unification, like the glue that you were talking about. Like that's, I mean, these are stories writ large over 22 features, and And I always thought there's this old book called How to Draw the Marvel Way that it was about the Marvel house
Yeah.
style, Sal Buscema drawing stuff like that. And I
Yeah.
mean, the filmmaking is interesting and different, but the things that unified seem stuff in house styles like that. And I guess you're one of the people that was on the ground floor doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was not drawing or anything, but I was on the, you know, producing side of it. But yes. And I think that, like, I think the comments are tough because I also remember when I was there and everybody's like, there's going to be saturation and comic book saturation is going to happen and people are going to stop going to the theater and they're going to get annoyed and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if it taught us anything, the first Thor movie made $360 million. Infinity War made 2 point whatever billion dollars. Like, you know, if anything, it's grown because it's showing. I think that if you can create compelling character narratives that are couched inside something exciting and marketable, then your audience is going to come back because they want to go on a journey. It's the same reason people binge watch shows. You know, the
Yeah.
Marvel movies became these binge worthy films that effortlessly became connected. And sure, there's a lot of contrived connective tissue, but that's anything. Like, that's storytelling, right? And like, I think that the brilliance behind it and seeing it come together is seeing and sitting in a room when you've got four producers and a director and a costume designer, like all of these department heads, and they're all just talking and finding what is the best idea. You know, is it a movie made by a committee? Sure, but all movies are in a sense, and I think that the directors do have a lot more say than I think the public realizes. Like, I think that you hire these people. Sure, you need someone that is mildly malleable, that's gonna listen and not come in and be like, "Fuck off!" Like, I'm not gonna listen to what you're saying, because Kevin and Lou and Victoria and all the executives there, like, they've built a reputation on knowing what they're doing.
Well,
And it's like, the stories you hear about David Fincher with, like, his attitude on set where he's very aggressive and but it's because he can do your job. Like, he knows lighting, he knows grip, he knows all of these things. Like, he can do these jobs. So if it's a matter of someone being lazy and not delivering, like, listen, this is an opportunity to listen and learn something. And
well, it just seems like the unique thing with Marvel to me seems to be that one, like, if you make you can this the common thing of making a movie by committee is supposedly a bad thing. Like, it's the problem isn't that it's people coming together to make the movie. It's that you don't want to do the lowest common denominator, or you don't want to be risk adverse. Like, if you have a common goal to try something interesting, and you guys and people are honest about their reactions to it, making a movie by committee, movies are collaboration. It actually works out a little better. And the other thing with particularly with Feige is that it just seems like you guys are on, or Marvel was on such a big streak, but like it's also like whenever like there's that connective tissue in other movies developing franchise, it's one thing to do that, and it seems like it's obvious that it's doing, but you're going to have an executive turnover at these other places that where that stuff's going to be abandoned, and it was just like this tedious thing you had to watch that never paid off. Versus like you get Marvel at that time could develop a style of movie and occasionally challenge themselves with something different, but like they were still like there was a unified form to it to a bunch of it just. I mean, obviously, we've never really seen anything like that, except maybe close to Disney and the early eras of that. But even that,
it's yeah, I think, like, learning that stuff is invaluable too, and being able to appreciate it, like that, the foresight to create war. It's I personally feel like that's what's missing with the Star Wars stuff, where it didn't feel like there was foresight into what is the bigger picture. And at the end of the day, like, I do remember the early day, and I don't know what's in Kevin's head or any of the, like, but like, I saw his ideas were thought of on the spot that ended up being implemented into things that were, they're like, man, they must have been thinking about that for 15 years, and it was like, it's just a really good idea that kind of came together. But like I said, the foundational elements of that story and those storytelling pieces that needed to come together were there, and that comes from the brilliance of minds that know how to just go, why don't we try this, why don't we be bold, why don't we, like, and I think that's where Marvel will hopefully continue to surprise people, and yeah, well, I mean, the reason that a lot of movies look, they use the same crews. The loyalty of Marvel Studios is incredible. If you are a department head there, if you are even a production assistant there, and you do a great job, they're going to keep. We called it permalance, basically, where they just kept bringing these people back, and it was like a family that kept growing. When I first started, and it was like, okay, we're doing 2 movies a year, like that's crazy. We're gonna do wow. And then after the success of Avengers, which it was constantly one of these things, it was just like, is it gonna work? Every meeting we would have, every conversation, it was like, can this work? And even the actors were, you can read old articles from them where they were like, yeah, we'd sit around and be like, what are we doing? Like, this is kind of silly. But the success of that, I think, showcased and validated that idea that it's like, we can do. And then it became, well, let's do 3 movies. And then it was like, well, let's do 4. As the slate began to grow, sometimes we'd be in development on this stuff for like 2 years. You'd be working on a movie for 25 months that doesn't come out. So,
What was a average day like at Marvel?
um, usually when I first started, I was so nervous because I was an assistant. I would like get in at like 3 in the morning to like prep meetings and like get things ready and get coffees, and I was like a stereotypical like skittish, I can't lose this opportunity. And but as it progressed, it was honestly, the beginning was a lot of research, like finding old issues, finding old storylines, finding great visual references from old comics, finding other references, what has been done before, with monsters, with aliens, with robots, with like, what have we actually seen, so we don't try to just emulate or recreate that.
So were you basically like an Easter egg department? Because I mean, one of the things that's always, as a comic fan, I've always appreciated about the Marvel stuff is old comic adaptations. What they would like, they just disregarded everything. That's like, let's make a new Batman love interest, Vicky Vale, or something like that, and then
Yeah.
and like Feige always says, there's a wealth of stuff in the comics. And you guys, what's always cool with you guys is when you change stuff organically, and then there's always this like nod to like, yeah, but we've read the comics, or we know what the comic storyline is like. We named this character this way just because like it's a nod towards that we actually know the source material. So I mean, was that your work?
There, yes, and in a lot of ways, like, for sure. A great example of this, when we were doing Age of Ultron, and we knew Vision was in it. For the longest time, they were so nervous about, like, he's got to be human, like, or not like human, but he needs to look like a human. And so all of the early passes of what Vision looked like were kind of like either marble-esque or like beige and white. Like, he was very human, in like, he wasn't. Red and green are aggressive colors.
Yeah.
And in the comics, it works because you're like, cool, there's a girl with like a crown on her head and a cape, and like but in the movie that feels moderately grounded, to throw a man who is red and green in an odd patching way can be hard. And we brought in a version, but my old boss at the time, Ryan, who's still the head of visual, he's one of the most incredible artists I've ever met, and just willing to just be like, let's try this. And he would use what you would say, like, from old issue, like, remember in this version of this Ditko comic when they introduced this small design element, how do we translate that into a costume that feels practical? But we started presenting these designs to Joss, and Ryan goes, and then I did one that's more more like the comic. And Kevin came in, and Victoria, like, everybody started coming in and seeing this image, and it was like, he's got to be that. Like, he has to be green and red. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah,
and it was always,
you nailed it. It's I mean, I when I first started reading Avengers, he was in the white, completely white part. But I mean, it's weird just because it feels it's such a tricky line. I remember in the first Raimi Spider-Man, they'd have those like long scenes between Green Goblin and Spider-Man where it's just two inanimate masks talking to each other with no expression, and
Yep.
clearly that's something that had to evolve over the years because it works on a flat image, a flat still
Yep.
image, but not talking. But you got it's one of those things Marvel does so well.
And Kevin was so cognizant about that because he was on Spider. You know, he was Laura Schuler Donner's like right hand when she was producing those films. When like Avi Arad was still involved in, whatever. But he would always say if there was ever a design presented or an idea presented in the script, he would always reference the scene of Spider-Man and the Green Goblin on the roof
That's the one I'm
when
talking
Green
about.
Goblin's
Yeah.
trying to convince him to be a bad guy, and he's like, it's two people, blah 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 blah, and he was like, they tried to by opening the eyepieces on the Green Goblin. He's like, but you can't see his mouth, and he's like, so the problem became there's no emotion, like you don't feel anything. So anything that like, and a lot of the characters from the comic books have designs like that because like you said on a 2D image you don't need to feel the emotion, you can read the words and feel what it is, but
Or you have like
that came
Ditko
up so
things
many
where
times.
like Ditko can like make Spider-Man's eyes look very emotive, even if they're very similar or something like that. But
Yep.
or Rorschach's face in Watchmen and stuff like that. But obviously, not a working challenge for you guys. It seems like something you have to be cognizant of. Like just still masks aren't going to do it, and motion pictures.
And it's when we were doing Spider-Man when that whole deal happened and we were able to use Spider-Man, it was Ryan's idea of how to actually use. He was like he was like, well, if we go with the idea that Peter Parker is a photographer, he would have just taken a camera aperture and created. He would have taken science goggles and put camera apertures in them that would allow the eyes to move to different sizes. That would be in the homemade suit, right? When he had just made the one with like the hoodie and the pullover hat. And then what then Tony Stark could translate that to is, well, okay, you've got mechanized pieces now that work like camera apertures that go to different sizes.
That's so
Um,
cool. Can you give me some other examples, like Black Panther or somebody else?
oh yeah, with Black Panther when we were doing that, that's another design that in the comic books, in all reality, it's an all black costume, right? But in the way that he was drawn, they would use purple as a way to differentiate the shadows in the costume, right? So when Ryan was like, what if vibranium gave a purple shimmer when you get light on it? So then when the suit is actually hit with light, you'd get purple breakup on the costume, so it doesn't just feel like a flat black surface. And it was something that, again, because the mask is so flat, they were like, well, it's got to open at the bottom or it's got to open the eye. Like pieces of it have to be able to break apart. And that was also another challenge because after you did Iron Man with the mask that could kind of just go back and forth, when you had Star-Lord and we knew we had to have a mask, it was like, okay, well then what's the mechanism on that? Well, it'll be an earpiece that would, as they continue to design these masks, what is going to be the mechanism that allows it to move or open that is not just like Iron Man, right? It can't just be a faceplate that goes, which becomes really challenging, and that's why I think Black Panthers is cool because it kind of breaks up. But in the first movie, it was more practical where it would he could take it off before it became more sci-fi-y where he could just kind of put it on. But yeah, using the purple as a way to differentiate shadows was something that was brought up. I don't know if I can. I think I can. I don't know if I can say this. Maybe I can. But the original idea for Vulture, the wingsuit, was going to be that he was in the battalion with Sam Falcon,
Okay.
like military, and he was called Vulture because he was the medic. So he was always around the dead body. Like whenever he would show up, it would be like, well, it's because we got somebody dead or injured. And then he sees that Falcon has become this like superhero, and he still has kind of like an old version of the wingsuit, and he kludges it and fixes it and makes this, wings. It became very Incredibles, where it's like, oh, this person's getting all the credit, and this person's the superhero, and I think that one of the all of the early pitches for the first Spider-Man Homecoming were it was Vulture and Mysterio. Like every writer that came in were like, these are the villains that I think, because they're kind of low level and I think Vulture works so well because he's like a blue collar, like, and you know, if you go what John Watts wanted, he was like, I want it to be a John Hughes movie with a superhero. You need a bad guy who doesn't have to have a huge backstory, and Vulture filled that pretty well.
I remember there was that vibe where it was like Batman Begins, where it was just like these are the villains we haven't gotten to yet. So like you know, Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow. It's like, yeah, they were if the Burton Schumacher series is continue, they were going to probably eventually get to them. But now when someone else is starting, these are the villains they're going to take over, and then yeah, I don't know what that means for so. You say there's no map out stuff, but like,
Well, there is now. Now it's like it's so mapped out to this, but like in the early days when we were doing Captain America 1 and Avenger, like that, I would say there were small stepping stones, but it wasn't the way that it is now, where it is so heavily, you know, and the company has grown now. There's more executives. Like it's a bigger thing because now they've got the Disney Plus shows and like you know, all of these things have to exist within one world. So now there's, you know, you got to plan 4 or 5 years in advance.
I just watched First Avengers last week, and I probably haven't seen it maybe since it came out. Whereas like Winter Soldier and Civil War, I've watched a bunch of times over and over. And man, I don't know if it's just like because all the payoffs in Endgame, but like First Avengers was way better than I remember. Like it was really like yeah, I don't know if it was just a better script than I remembered, or and just all the things things at the time I didn't love as much. Now I've fallen in love with again, or but it would
Yeah,
it was. I mean, that is a great trilogy of films.
it's a good, and that was a story that like even the first one evolved. I would say more than the second, but the first movie evolved so much from when it was like pitched. There was like an additional villain, and like it was just a way bigger movie. And I think what was great about it was it is kind of a pared down story. At the end of the day, like I think it works so much better because it's so much about the Avengers. It's about them, and you get the big global threat at the end. But like, it still feels like for most of the movie, it's about them and not things just happening to them, but them happening to each other.
Oh no, I
And
meant Captain America, the first Avenger. So
oh!
I go because
Yeah,
the Whedon movie I loved to death. That was like I mean that's yeah, but I mean like I don't know.
First Avenger. Yeah,
Yeah, Joe Johnston is like he's great. I love Rocketeer, but like I mean the level of directors you guys are getting later just he and but I mean no, the movie was held up way better than I remembered.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Joe brings that like Captain America feels like the Rocketeer or Jumanji. Like it feels like an old '90s action movie.
Okay.
It's not as sophisticated, I don't think, as you know, Civil War, but it's totally different. Like he made a really cool '40s feeling film.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I think yeah they do hold up better, and I think you know Winter Soldier is still one of the best story wise. Like it's just I don't know. It will always hold a good place in my brain.
So on the side, were you working on scripts, and were you still doing some like production design shorts or how was this working?
I stopped doing production design maybe a year after I worked at Marvel. I was doing it on music videos and a couple short films, but then I really like switched gears to doing writing shorts, directing music videos, like I did a Kickstarter for my first big like $20,000 short, Cadence back in 2014. Did that, and then did a few other you know smaller things. And there's a lot of stop and go of like, well, let's put this project together, and like, but you know, I was spending 12 or 14 hours plus a day on the Marvel stuff. Like it became very taxing. But again, like if you make time for something that you're passionate about, you make time for it. So I didn't really start writing features probably till like 2013, like actually sitting down to like focus on them. But it was just because I was reading a lot more scripts. You know, I think to understand it, I was trying to put my, you know, and we'd always get writer and director pitches, and
This
so
is
we
during the development time.
So yeah, I read a lot more, and then, you know, I was like, okay, well, no, I'll read the blacklist scripts and see what's out there that's not getting made, that's compelling or good, and I've just started to try to hone what is like my storytelling style. So, and it's still, I think, evolving and changing as I continue to learn. And I think that's one of the cool things I saw at Marvel too, was these filmmakers who would get typified into, Scott Derrickson, who was, notorious for movies like Sinister and low, but even James Gunn, to be able, John Watts. Before John Watts did Spider-Man, he had done a $750,000 indie film. But just the cop car, yeah, with Kevin Bacon. But it all just came like that is, I think, where people don't see, like, these people have to earn the job, right? Like, they have to come in there, they have to pitch, they have to have a great idea, they have to have direction, they have to understand the characters, and that's where I think that maybe, well, they're like, well, they're still being made by committee, but like, there's a reason that director was chosen, and they do bring something. And while it gets kind of augmented into the Marvel machine, I still think that there's certain distinct things about the films that will always be inherently tied to that director, in a cool way.
Okay, you may not be able to talk about this, but I did want to ask, were you around when Edgar Wright was on Ant-Man? And
Yeah, I can't really talk about it, but it was a very it was creative differences, but it was a project that had been around before even Avengers got made. And Edgar was like, I read the first draft of that script, I think, in 2011. And he came. It was just not the right time for Ant-Man yet. Like, they had already done obscure characters with Iron Man. They needed to wait a little bit longer. But it sometimes things with Patty, who's on Thor 2, and then went and did Wonder Woman. Again, creative differences happen, and yeah.
So, from the development time, how did the feature get developed then? From your job, did you quit and then go straight into I'm writing director?
So I knew these, well, with Dreamcatcher specifically. From the shorts and stuff, I was able to actually get, like, manager and agent and all. Like, I was able to actually start building the tools that I needed to be able to get out there more and not just be the Marvel guy. Because that's the other thing about Hollywood, is people like to put you in the, like, oh, so you work at Marvel, so that's what you do.
Sure.
Like, you're a development guy at Marvel. Like, you needed to break perception, because optics became everything. Cool, you made a short film. Cool, you directed a music. Like, what are you going to do next? So I had met these producers back in a barbecue in, like, 2014. We had put together a project that was like a $3 million thing. The financing ended up falling through, but I'd stayed in contact with them because we had similar sensibilities, and they were finishing up a movie with Wes Craven called The Girl in Photographs, 2014. It was the last movie he did as a producer before he passed away. And it was written by Oz Perkins, who's Anthony Perkins' son.
I just saw his Gretel and Hansel or whatever.
How was it?
It was well shot.
I heard it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's no. I mean, he's definitely got a career ahead of him. There's some really interesting stuff in it. Are you still? Do you ever talk to Aaron Smith anymore?
Eric Smith.
Aaron Smith from Showplace.
Oh yeah, no, probably not in years.
He highly recommended it to me.
Did you ever see The Blackcoat's Daughter?
No, I remember. I looked at his credits and I recognized the name, but
it was called February, I think, but it sold at Sundance for like $8 million. It was a huge sale, and then like it never really took off. I digress. What was I talking? Oh, producers, and then like out of the blue, after I left Crypt, and was just really freelancing, doing development Bibles, and just setting up certain, trying to sell shit. They reached out and they were like, hey, we have money. We have a very loose idea of a story, and we have to shoot in January. And it was like October.
Okay.
So I wrote the first draft of Dreamcatcher in about 10 days.
How long was your prep?
We started formal prep November. I finished a draft that I liked by like November 9th, 8th, 9th. And I started storyboarding. We went into casting. And you when you know the budget, you can kind of write around. And we knew certain things like one of the producers had this beautiful mansion in the hills that they lived in, so we were able to use that as one of the set pieces. One of the other major set pieces is at a huge music festival. So anyway, we had about 4 weeks of formal prep, but in Hollywood, everything shuts down the last 2 weeks of December.
Sure.
So we were trying to close actor deals and get a lot of the location permits and everything set up. So at the top of January, we could be good to go. It is a great time to shoot a movie because a lot of TV shows don't come back from hiatus until the end of January. So a lot of actors who you wouldn't be able to get otherwise or may not do it for the budget we had, we were able to, hey, do you either want to get paid and work for 3 weeks? And, it's younger people, so that's already helpful too. And we had a pretty good reception to the script, so it was a really cool process, but it really did come together extremely fast because very rarely do you have money. Usually is, they're like, well, we got to get the cast, and then the cast dictates the budget and the blah, blah, blah. But like we've got the money, we got to go make the movie, and this is the window of time in which we have to shoot it for certain reasons. So that's what we did.
Well, I did want to ask you about one of the things that has gotten me away from LA and rare to come back was just the general hustling aspect too, especially if you wanted to write and direct stuff. Like the hustling seemed exhausting after a certain point, and I just had a lot of friends that were just hitting brick walls with it. I mean, how do you feel about that?
You're absolutely right. There is a hustle always. I think if I had not been so invested in wanting to do this since I was a kid, then maybe my drive would have diminished. But I feel like everything that I've done, I've always felt that I haven't gotten to the success or place that I wanted to get yet. It used to always be, well, if I sell a script, well, if you did that, then you got, well, I want to direct a feature. Okay, well, you did, I constantly put some sort of expectation on myself to keep the drive inspired. And I have days when I'm not feeling great about it, but at the end of the day, I go right back to hustle mode and just think yeah, but when I get on set, when I set something up, when I start working with actors, when I start working with producers and department heads, it all feels worth it.
So you just remind yourself of the actual filmmaking goal itself?
Yeah. And it's the difference between a lot of the people that the longer that you are here, because I think there's a daunting facade of, well, there's so much competition. Everybody has a script. Everybody wants to write. Everybody wants to act. Everybody wants to direct. So-and-so's mom is, Barbara Hershey's ex-agent. Everybody knows somebody who's doing something. And but no matter where you are, there's going to always be someone better looking, better connected, more financially stable, whatever field you're in. And the reality of the people who are doing versus dreaming out here is massive. There is a huge disparity between the people who are well, I'm an actor, and it's okay, well, what are you going to classes? Are you going on no, but I'm really hoping I can save some money and go to a class. And it's that's if you're not writing, then you're not a writer. If you're not actually trying to do or actively pursuing these things, then you're just being complacent.
Yeah.
And it is a city that breeds complacency because a lot of people get so burnt out because they're not getting, the goal is hard.
Well,
but I don't know what the solution is.
You put your finger on something and it's been, I just wish I'd been shooting more all these years. I lamented the whole, especially as technology's got easier, I think stuff you shoot on lower prosumer stuff looks great, especially if you compare it to what good stuff your phone shoots better than a Viper did in 2006 or something like that. And and even then, I should be shooting more. I'm just kind of, I don't know. You put your finger on the doing thing. That's kind of a haunting thing for. Do you? Yeah.
But there's never a wrong time though. If you get inspired to do something, you can still jump back into it, you know. And I think that it can be hard when you start getting the responsibilities and the reality of being an adult, because those things suck, like rent and family and like bills. But at the end of the day, like, also something you made a good point of is like, yeah, you could make a movie on your phone. Steven Soderbergh just made one, like, but also don't be disillusioned by that notion. Like, it's still hard to make a movie. It's still hard to write a good story. Like, you could go outside and shoot hummingbirds flying around and call that a movie, but is it going to do anything for you? Is it going to actually give you that scratch the thing that you're missing?
Well,
Probably not. Like,
right now, what I'm thinking about is less about the making of something versus um, I'm trying to convince myself that the way one of my friends always phrased it was that the bullseye is getting smaller for say you make a small feature like a $200,000 feature, something like that, and disregarding the whole all the hustling you have to get that, and that weird thing where like it's easier to get $2 million than it is to get $200,000, which you know. But then, like, what's your pathway? You have to get to a big festival and then sell at a big festival, or get sold to the streamers and hope that they put some money behind it. Or I know Paul Schrader said that like the gatekeepers or the tastemakers pick like 5 movies a year that are going to maybe kind of come up from nowhere, that are, you know, maybe going to be in contention at the end of the year, known about, and even then, because a lot of my friends are making movies and then the hustles for the second movie is just as hard. Like that's the weird thing I've noticed.
yeah, it's also about momentum and relevance. Like, a lot of people don't care about your movie until it's done, and then they only care about it for a very small window of time. And if you can't capitalize on that, like, you're done. Until you find the next big opportunity to like shock them and be like, oh, you came up from the, you know, you were buried and you came up and you did it again. Like, it's never easy. And even actors, like, these huge actors sometimes don't get the offers that I think a lot of people anticipate that they do. Like, why are they not just in movies all the time? And it's like, well, they're not getting the offers you think. No matter how talented you get, it goes back to, you know, you're only as important as you can be for a certain amount of time in the public eye. But if you can't stay inspired on your own merits and your own, you know, goals and ambition, then it's an impossible industry to succeed in, right? Because you're constantly just going to be like, oh, I'm let down again. I'm let down again, and that does, it hurts and it sucks. But it's like, if you can navigate around that and use that to hopefully propel you into something unexpected, which is, I think, 9 times out of 10 how anything happens in this town. Like, there's when timing is everything, and not just in a hyperbolic way. Like, I've seen executives read a script on a Tuesday and pass, and then on Friday the assistant goes, did you give it a read? And they're like, no, I'll read it over the weekend. And on Monday they're like, it's one of the best things I've ever read. And it's like the mentality of, if you catch somebody on a bad day, if you catch somebody when they haven't had their coffee, like, if they watch the screener of your movie in a bad mood, or they're going through a fight with someone, like, it can throw everything off, you know. But if the timing is right and you get the person in a good mood who's looking to make a decision that day, it happens, you know. But that's just the reality of, unfortunately, how it goes, and it sucks, and there's no way to predict it.
Do you have your you said your next feature lined up?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to be doing another project in July, August, that hopefully in the next like month we'll be able to make an announcement about. Bigger budget, and you know, there's a couple big things on the horizon that I'm fighting very hard for. One of those is Animorphs. As I pitched it as a trilogy to the company who's getting the rights. It's been a year-long thing, but like it's something that I want so bad, and it's like constantly I'm just like, what's going on with this? But hoping that pans out in a meaningful way, because that would be a dream project for
I guess
me.
I'm unfamiliar with Animorphs.
They were a book series in the 90s that were like when Goosebumps were popular. And all of they were probably most notable for their covers, and they were like somebody like in an action pose, and then they were turning into an animal. And in the bottom corner of the book, there was like a flip thing that as you turn the pages, they would turn into an animal. But it's like kind of sci-fi, kind of John Hughesy, but like super dark, but really diverse and interesting, and it would be really cool. So we'll see what happens.
Did you do you ever come back to Evansville or Newburgh or Henderson?
I did actually for the first. I had not been back in 6 years. I came back in October of last year.
Where's your family
My mom's in Henderson, or I'm sorry, now she's in Madisonville, which is like 30 minutes south of Henderson. But a lot of the people I went to high school with that I wanted to see, like we spent a lot of time at like Time Out Lounge and like just like a lot of random bars and things. But yeah, I went back into my high school and said hello to the teachers that really inspired me. But what I want to do actually, to be honest, is I want to do a premiere of Dreamcatcher at Showplace East. And I haven't reached out to Debbie or to anybody about arranging.
They would be totally down for it. I know I spoke to some one of the I've been speaking to a lot of Evansville filmmakers, and they said Mick in particular. Mick was the guest on last week's episode, but Mick in particular is very, very open to showing stuff, especially this time of year too, like in the summers. But they've rebranded Showplace South back into an art house theater again. But yeah,
wow, that's so cool.
That's totally doable.
Yeah, I want to do, and I know I could get 200 people to come and make it a big thing. And honestly, like I'd love to maybe even try to pose it as like a fundraiser of some sort to help like an art community, like up and coming like drama club, or I don't know, like something that where you could actually give back to the community and make it about celebrating art and really convincing people that like you can go out and chase after the things that you want, and like it's not just a fever dream. My guidance counselor in high school, when I wanted her to send my transcripts to USC, she was like, yeah, but like maybe you should just keep your dreams grounded in Kentucky. And I had good grades. Like it wasn't like I was some straight D kid that was like gonna get rich. It was so upsetting to me that was the mentality. Like you'll be fine here. Like just stay where the water is warm. And so I think being able to tell people that, and that's why I was really excited to be able to talk to you and come on the show, because it's like people, you never know who's going to hear that one line or that one moment or that one question that's going to just go, I'm triggered and I'm excited and I'm inspired and I can go do that. And I wish that when I was in high school, somebody would have been able to do that for me. Like somebody would have come in and said, I'm doing it. Maybe I'm not, Johnny Depp, or I'm not David Fincher, but I'm doing something, and you can do something too, and everybody's capable of doing something great.
Well, I mean, it's particularly like you doing well in LA. Like, first off, when you came back to high school, or came back to town, and you hung out with some high school friends, what were their reactions to your like LA stories, or working in movie stories?
It's always tough, to be perfectly honest, because I never want to come across pretentious, and I never want to come across like, oh, this is the kid who left the small town and then canoodled with, whatever the mindset or the facade might seem. I was so cognizant, and I never wanted to be that. So when you're trying to like tell stories about whatever, you never want to be like the name dropper or like the thing, and I don't know. So it's actually sometimes kind of tough. It's almost more fun to just not talk about the Hollywood side of it and just talk about like life stuff, like friends and relationships and life. Like, are you happy? Are you are you still happy pursuing the thing that you went out there to do? Hey, you made a movie that I had not made the movie, or I don't think I talked about really the movie when I was back before. When I came back in 2014, they had asked me to talk to like juniors and seniors, like the class, to just be like, hey kids, like I'm an alum, I'm at Marvel, go chase your dreams. And that was really cool. Like to me, that was like, that's, being able to identify, answer questions, because they're fascinated by that stuff. Like, what is the process of this? Like, how does this get made? What is, real versus what's practical effects and CG? Like, I don't know. There was just there's an inquisitive nature to that age group, 16 to 18, where things still excite them. And I think as you get older, it's like being an adult and like the reality of life happens. And so coming back, I don't know, like, yeah, it's long story short, it's just harder because I don't want to come across like an asshole.
Sure.
And I haven't been around for my mindset, like what's going is like through Facebook or Instagram, so like I don't want to create some false sense of like, oh, we're still friends, like we're still as close as we were in 2004, because you've gone on and gotten married and had children and had this amazing life, and like I don't want to seem fake. I don't know. So it's sorry. It's a
No, no.
tough
My
it's a
favorite is
tough world.
I. Whenever I find myself name dropping, like my favorite is when the just recognition does not come there, and you're just like you're an asshole two times over. Like it's
Yeah,
always fun.
yeah.
Well, you also
Yeah.
punch.
Who's that?
Yeah, I get that a lot. But you touched on something. Is there something unique about this area that makes people afraid to go out to LA? Because it took years before I finally got to LA, and I kept having to trial places. I went to Louisville first, then I went to Austin for a few years, and or is it just a hometown thing? Is a town of a certain size, people don't have an economic model of going to another town and making that cost of living work?
I maybe both. Like I think if I had grown up in one town, it might have been a little different. Like I think that's where moving around when I was younger helped, because I never felt completely rooted somewhere. My life was not rooted in a town, in a memory, in a idea of somewhere. Um, I think that there's also, it's the same thing about people out here though that get complacent. Like it's easy to get complacent when things you get into the groove of something, and I think places like Evansville are are nice towns with good people, and there's opportunity. Maybe not the opportunity you'd want in a dream job, but there is opportunity. It's relatively safe, and like I don't know, like there's certain things. It's like what's wrong with it? Like if and when I first got out here, I admittedly did resent like, oh, you wanted to get married? Oh, you're pregnant at 19? Good for you. But like some people want that. Some people wanted like their the way that I wanted to make films, they wanted to have a family and they wanted to buy a house and they wanted to do these, and it's like why it's not my place to judge what your dream or your goals are or how they've changed as you've gotten older. So maybe it's what we're taught, but also like I think, um, and maybe it's also about inspiration. Like it's hard to sometimes be inspired for things that are artistic in a town that is not predicated on art.
Yeah.
I know that the University of Evansville has actually got a great theater department. A lot of great actors have come out of that, but like. Are people talking about Parasite? Probably not. Like the small community of people might be talking, but like it's not the way it is out here where everybody's like Parasite this and Parasite that. Like it's, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I do think that it's important for people, no matter where they are in the world, to be informed and educated and told that it's not unruly to have a goal that seems outlandish, and as you get older and you learn a little bit of pragmatism, like sure, that dream or goal can change or evolve, but when you're 16 or 17 years old or 15 years old or 12, no one should be telling you that you can't go out and make movies, or you can't want to be a singer, or like it. We can't train our children and our generations after us that like for some reason, just because a job industry is competitive or hard, that it's not worth pursuing. Because otherwise you'll get people who are unhappy unnecessarily.
Well, I guess that for one final question, you brought this up earlier. Are you happy right now?
Ah, uh, yeah, I think so. I think I think coming back actually showed how happy I have gotten I think for a while I was still figuring out, like, am I happy? Because I was constantly, like I said earlier, weighing myself against myself and everyone else that are doing, you know, Sam Raimi directed a movie at 23. What was I doing at 23?
Yeah.
You know, it's you can't do that. Like, that will get you nowhere. And so when I was able to let go and start to focus on, like, the things that are inspiring to me and the people around me, and, like, being grateful to know the people who are doing cool shit, like, and being happy for their success only allowed me to really be happy for my own success then too. You know, when it stopped becoming a competition, when it stopped becoming a woe is me, they've got the opportunity and I don't. Um, because, like I said, a lot of people don't have the journey that I've had, and I need to be grateful for that. And I don't ever want to take anything for granted. So I do think, as now at 31, I can be more grateful, and some of it is retrospective, and I wish I could have celebrated it more at the time. But
It's so hard
I,
out in LA, especially like the grass is greener stuff, the competition, like all that stuff. It's so it just seeps in so quickly.
yeah,
It's in the water or something.
it is, and it's everywhere because everybody that's around you, even people that are extremely successful, are still like, yeah, but you're doing this, and it's like, yeah, but you're doing this, and it's like, who cares? As long as we're all doing something that we're excited about, even if it's writing a script, if it's, you know, painting your fingernails, whatever it is, like, do it, and if it's exciting to you, celebrate it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Jacob Johnston, thanks for being on the podcast.
yeah. Thanks for having me. This has been great.